Hi, I'm Rebecca Bradley, and this is a virtual crime book club. Today is Monday, the 5th of October 2020, and we're reading A Dark Matter by Doug Johnstone. If you are watching this video on the YouTube channel, please be aware there may be spoilers. So don't read it, don't watch it unless you've read the book or unless you don't mind spoilers. Hi, Marina.
Hi, sorry I'm late. My computer's decided to update.
No, it's fine. As you can hear, we've only just started.
Good.
So, do I take it everybody's read the book?
Yes. Me.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Or did you like it or dislike it?
Yeah.
It was good.
It was like, yeah, it was okay.
It was okay. Yeah, that's how I felt. It was okay.
Yeah, that was my reaction too.
I really wanted to enjoy it.
It's a bit of a flat reaction this week.
It was quite different from what I expected. I think I thought that it would be much funnier, you know, like the sort of the anti-Tuominen style of The Man Who Died and that kind of thing. So that's somehow, because, you know, I thought the scope of black humor and so on, and it wasn't really. It was quite sad and, yeah, dysfunctional and, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know, I thought, sorry, Rebecca, I thought it would make a great TV series with those really strong characters and a great setting. And I thought maybe if that could be explored in a different way, perhaps that would be better. I don't know. But
Well,
different format.
Yeah. He's got a second book out with the same
Oh, he does? Okay.
So maybe, you know, when it's not the immediate family dying, maybe it will be different, yeah.
I have to say, I thought the story was a cracking story. It was very good. But I had a bit of an issue with the way that it was told, with these the very short chapters, and it was almost paragraph by paragraph, and there was really no need for that, I felt. I don't think it did the story any favours, which was a shame, but that's just my view.
You felt it was a bit choppy?
Yes. Because I quite like you have a name for a chapter so that you know whose story you're telling, but it was almost, the chapters were so short that it was so fragmented. I sort of had very little idea most of the time of the timeline, and I just didn't think it didn't. I don't know. It just didn't hang together terribly well. But that said, I thought it was a very good story. If that makes any sense at all.
So the feedback on this book is a bit flat. So when I say what did you like, what did you dislike, is a bit difficult because the feeling I'm getting back from everybody is a bit like, meh. So how do you feed back on that?
No, I did like it. I pretty much right from the first opening chapter talking about the burning the body on the fire. I was just like, oh my God, you know. I sort of agree with the very small burst chapters. I wanted a bit more length in it so I could really get into each character, but he just kept switching. But saying that, I did like the way it was led with the name of the person. I found it very easy to follow that. But no, I liked it. I mean, I did like it. I thought it was all right.
I thought it was an enjoyable book to read, but like last month's book, it was like halfway through before there was an actual crime. Unless you count burning someone, having a funeral pyre in your back garden, which I'm sure it probably is illegal, but wasn't presented in this book as a crime.
Although it did give me a problem with doing that right at the beginning, because it seemed so unlikely.
Yes.
I never kind of I never really worked out why the undertaker who died was so keen for that to happen, and why he would put his family in that very difficult position, and why the first thing that wasn't mentioned about it was the smell of roasting meat rather than all the lovely herbs. Because I just went, this this doesn't feel very real to begin with. And maybe that was quite intentional. I mean, I don't know, because it was obviously aiming to be quite humorous about certain aspects. But it did start me off, I thought, on the wrong foot. So although I liked the story, and there were actually quite a lot of little mini stories going on, and I'm not sure all of those were quite necessary, but I liked the sort of thread of the story, and the short chapters I had no problem with. It was labelled. I always knew whose head I was in. So I really enjoyed that. But it kind of kicked it off with this real, what felt like quite a credibility stretch to begin with. And I think that kind of put me off a bit at the beginning, and continue to do so.
I just can't see the good folk of Edinburgh having putting up with that. The neighbours would have been on the phone straight away.
Exactly. Nobody ever noticed, which seemed extraordinary.
There's a few credibility stretches within this.
Yeah, I couldn't work out why the criminal, what was his name, Craig, at the end, why he stabbed his ex-wife, because it seemed quite random as well that, she found out that he'd done this, but somebody had texted her to tell her, and his reaction was to try and kill her. Why?
Yeah.
Was that just me?
No. Well, that was me as well.
No, I think that's a very valid point, I would have said.
I mean,
I think he didn't know how to finish the book.
What
I
about
wanted
the
a
book
dramatic
did anybody
ending.
like?
Say that again, sorry.
What about the story did anybody like?
I like the characters. I thought the characterization of the three women was really well done, and I found them all interesting in their own right. I thought that was very strong.
I like this setting. I thought his descriptions of Edinburgh were so spot on, and I went, oh, I've been in that pub, and I've been in that pub, and I've been there. It was great from that point of view for me.
I did like the three characters. I thought he'd done a good job of creating three very different women, and the generational thing worked really well. I did feel it was a little bit preachy on the feminist front now and then, which upset me when it's a man writing it. It felt a little bit of a, I'm going to kind of belabor this, which annoyed me. But I liked the actual characters, and I could see them as Melanie, I think you said, on the screen. I could see it as a TV drama continuing with these women, their interactions. I thought the girlfriend, Hannah's girlfriend, Indy, was really, really well done. She was great. So, it had a lot going for it. But I think that's why I felt a bit about it. It was kind of good in parts.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's again the thing that we discussed with Aber Mukherjee's book that was set in India, that whether it's because it's the first in a series and then there's a lot of sort of setup that again sometimes the story is not quite as much as we would have liked it to be, but we like the characters, so we want to read more about them.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'd rush out and read the next one, to be honest. And I love private investigator, mysteries. I mean, that's really a big thing for me. So, don't know. Probably watch it.
Did the setting of the funeral directors add to the story at all? Did it add anything to it for you?
Yeah, I thought it was very good.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it was an original setting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to learn a bit about what goes on behind the scenes and what it's like to run a funeral company.
Yeah.
A little bit different to it just being a private detective on its own.
I did rather hope. I'm sorry, Rebecca, I've interrupted you.
No, that's fine.
But it was such an intriguing setting, and it was such a mismatch between the funeral director business and the private investigation business. And I was expecting all the way through to the reason he'd started investigating was because of this man that went missing and everything. And then that kind of obviously went down a different direction, which was fine, but it left me with this is still quite a strange combination. I felt I wanted an explanation for it, but I liked it as a setting. It has a lot of possibility, I think. So I think that was a good choice. I just like a bit more background for it, really.
Yeah. Somebody's already brought up the Three Strong Women. It was you, Wendy. It was told from the point of view of a family of three women whose relationships with men had been complicated. How do you think this drove the narrative? The fact that there were strong women and that they were on their own and their relationships with men were difficult. Do you think it did anything for the story?
I think this is why it felt quite odd that a man was writing it. And I think if it had been done without being quite so clunky in places, and I'm not disrespecting him because he did most of it really well, but there were places where I felt, oh, this is a man writing this. And that kind of brought me out of the women's heads. But having said that, they were three good characters that he'd created, and their relationships with men were actually all very different, which was interesting. I mean, for one, it was the father, and for one, obviously, her husband, and then, of course, the middle one with her ex, who turned out to be the villain of the piece. I mean, it did sort of flow through this kind of development of how their relationships with their men were and how that affected their outlook on life very much, as well as driving the actual, narrative of where the plot was going. So yeah, it was interesting.
Did anybody else find it unusual? Did it bring anybody else out of the story knowing that a man had written it?
I have to say that didn't bother me at all. I mean, I just think, well, women write about men, men write about women. Whether it's a male or female, it doesn't, it doesn't occur to me to think about that.
Sorry, Sue, I absolutely agree with you. It really shouldn't matter. But because when there was quite a few fairly, for me, heavy-handed feminist angles that came in, I think that's when I became aware that actually this is a man writing. I don't think a woman would have written them in quite the same way for those tiny paragraphs. But for most of it, he got it spot on. And I wouldn't have noticed. I mean, I'm not usually aware of the gender of the writer when I'm reading about the characters. So I kind of felt that was something that felt a bit odd in this one.
I felt it was more that he had created three females who were very different, who didn't, because they never felt a family as such. You had the not go-getting, but the larger than life sort of American grandmother. You had the failed marriage divorcee, hadn't really done anything with her life, wife or non-wife, and then you had the lesbian daughter. And to me, it was a case of bringing in sort of almost stereotypes that he was going to build different books on, rather than this actually being a family who gelled together.
Interesting.
You didn't think the three women worked well together?
I didn't see any commonality. I mean, I don't expect three generations to be the same, but was like that none of these women actually had any real connection with each other. Well, there was no shared history, which families usually have.
But there was the man who died at the beginning. He was the kind of cohesive element, I felt, that kind of, because they all loved him. And
they all loved him, but they never had a birthday celebration or a Christmas together or a holiday or anything that brought them all together that was ever mentioned.
That's a good point.
It's quite a short timeline. But I take what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but usually, I mean, I would imagine that if you were sitting there at his wake sort of ideas we're all doing, you would remember a time that you'd all spent together with them.
There'd be something in the backstory you'd expect.
Yes, yes. I mean, it just would have needed a couple of sentences. I don't mean, you know, it's going into any great depth with it, but it just didn't feel, it felt contrived rather than natural. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I did feel that they weren't necessarily, I mean, it felt almost like the author was telling us that the family was supportive of each other rather than showing us, you know. So I didn't feel that there was enough there, you know, to really feel those bonds between the three women. Yeah. But I thought that was just perhaps because, you know, I'm used to sort of more Latin families that are, you know, they never let go of you kind of thing. So, you know, I thought that it would be more like that. But
and were you surprised by how the Simon Lawrence storyline was resolved?
I have to say, there was one bit, and I don't know if I missed something.
Hi, Norman.
Hi there.
It really puzzled me. I don't know if anybody's got the answer. There was when they were looking for she asked, oh, was it Archie for the name of the second person that was buried at the time, and he'd hidden it in a coffin lining, and she knew. First of all, why did he hide it in a coffin lining? And second, why did she go straight to the coffin lining? I just didn't understand what happened there at all. If anybody could enlighten me, I'd be very grateful, really.
Well, I think I just kind of accepted that because he'd been desperate to hide it and he'd been building that coffin and that's what he'd been doing. So that would have guided her to maybe look at it. But the thing that bothered me was that there would be accounts which would show who got buried when as well and how many funerals there'd been, and one piece of paper didn't seem enough to hide the burial she was looking for.
Yeah. Well, that just seemed all very odd.
Yeah,
I think the idea of going to dig up bodies was the most unreal thing, because you know, no matter how fit you are, that would be hard work.
She didn't even get a blister.
These days, they have diggers that dig graves, not two people with shovels. You know.
Yeah, that bothers me, because I did think, how on earth have they managed to dig the grave, check the coffin, fill it all back in, all in the space of one night, and still go home and sleep? And it just didn't make any sense. And for me, digging up the second grave didn't make sense, because I didn't understand why Archie didn't just tell her, because he obviously knew that she's going to dig this grave and find the second body. So I just didn't get why he didn't just tell her when she found the bit of paper. It didn't make any sense.
No, it didn't make any sense to me.
I thought when the stone went in the ground, that's what he said. Like, okay, fine.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you. Sorry, Craig. Sorry,
yeah, I said it was. I thought when the first spade shovel would have gone into the ground on the second grave, that's the point Archie would have said, okay, yes, buried. But he didn't. He carried on and dug. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what I thought. I thought, you know, you would have stopped at that point. Yeah.
And she's 70, the poor love. I mean, she needs to go and have a nice lie down and something. I mean, it just wasn't realistic.
No.
And I was a bit put off. I mean, I know he had to have a reason for the chap to be killed, but really? Yeah.
And this is
throw in a bit of necrophilia, why don't you?
Yeah, and I think this was where with the digging and things, because I really was reading sort of with my hands in front of my eyes, and I was thinking this was the opportunity where you could have done it in a more humorous way, with them sort of mucking it up, making a mess of it, you know. And then Archie confessing, you know, okay, you know, I don't want to go through with this. Let me tell you what actually happened, or something, you know. So it just felt a bit too visceral, and so somehow the tone didn't fit in with the rest of the tone of the book. I don't know, did anybody else feel like that?
Yeah.
Norman, as you might have guessed, it's not been the most popular book. What did you think of it?
Well, I've got to admit, I didn't have a chance to get it. Just as I'm listening to everyone else's views, but from what I'm hearing, I'm not missing anything. So I'm glad I didn't waste the time on it.
Okay.
You talked about Stephen Lawrence. Well, was it Peter Longthorne, the professor? Or the
Yeah.
I'd like to explore that a little bit more. He committed suicide, but they didn't really explore it, I don't think, much afterwards why he committed suicide. Obviously, he was having an affair, but it wasn't as deep as they first thought. So I'd like to explore that one.
Yeah.
They stopped that quite quickly and just moved on.
I think the whole thing about the driving issues for the plot, it was almost style above substance. It was like, to make good TV scenes, you were to dig up a grave or you would have somebody commit suicide. But there didn't seem to be much motivation for these things to happen, and that needed a lot of strengthening to make it a satisfying sort of narrative for me. And it wasn't funny enough for me to accept that these things were happening in this world that was actually for entertainment only and just for fun, because it had things like necrophilia and things in it. So it was a real kind of mishmash for me. And I think, as a writer, he's obviously, I enjoyed kind of reading his prose, and I had no issue with that at all. There were bits that I thought flowed really well and kind of got me into the story. Then I kept getting slapped by these things that didn't make sense. And it just seemed a real shame. It seemed that if somebody had sort of sat down and gone through the plot with him, if you had a writing buddy who had done that, and the questions that you usually ask are, but why would your character do that? And I think that might have helped it make a really, really good novel. And maybe it's all fixed in the next one. And, I don't know. This wasn't his first novel.
I think he's written quite a few, hasn't he? I think it's probably about his 8th. I was a bit surprised because I looked it up.
Oh, right.
But I think this was only published earlier this year. But I think it is about his 7th or 8th, which I was a bit surprised about, I have to say.
Okay.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I really, really enjoyed his previous one, which was quite different, Breakers, which was about a family in Edinburgh as well, a poor family who do break-ins and things, and there's this wonderful sibling relationship. But that one was quite touching, quite moving, very different, so really pulling at the heartstrings. And this one I thought was going to be funny, and I totally agree with you, Wendy. It just didn't feel like it was funny enough, but also not, the plot not dramatic enough, or drama for the sake of drama. Yeah.
What about the individual side storylines? What did you make of those?
Can I just say, the one that did make me laugh that I loved was the
old
woman
man
in the attic. Yeah, I mean, he was a lovely character, and I really hoped that it was going to end up with her moving into the house and helping him out, and just and that was really sweet, and it worked, and I mean, I think the postwoman could have had a lot more development and benefited from it, because I was really interested in her story and the man's story, and I thought this could have been lovely. But there were so many little stories that I think it was there were too many, and none of them really got a lot of development. But that was the one that I would have happily read, 5 more chapters on, because it was good, and it was funny, and it was lovely.
It was sweet.
Yeah, tick my boxes.
What about everybody else? You've got the main one, which is Melanie, and then you've got Rebecca and Natalie, because that's the Simon Lawrence storyline, which is another main storyline. You've got the Jacob Glassman, which Wendy has just talked about, and then you've got Orla, who thinks her husband is seeing someone else, but he's painting.
Didn't really add a lot.
I didn't really get what what the point of all of that was. In from Orla's point of view, I presumed that something was going to come out of that she needed him to be cheating for some reason, but I just didn't get it. Obviously, she's off having an affair, and she wants to presumably go off with the young gardener and do whatever she's doing. But I just didn't understand why she was so desperate for her husband to be cheating. It just didn't make any sense to me. It just felt, for me, it just felt that they had, this storyline was put in to give Jenny something to do to beef up the story. I just didn't get it. Just didn't feel. I would have liked Jenny and Liam to get together. That's the way it seemed to be going. But in terms of it just didn't feel realistic to me, I have to admit.
I would agree with that entirely.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I think that the whole private investigator thing was totally ridiculous, in that any advances they made in their investigation was because of Thomas. Now, there's no way that any real policeman would have been doing the things that he did for them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He wouldn't risk his job for that.
No.
And there's so many procedures and hoops that they've got to jump through to do things that it just, that didn't work quite well for me. I suppose you needed that because there were lots of things that they couldn't do for themselves to make it work, the DNA and things like that, but it didn't seem very realistic.
So that was one of the negatives of the book for everybody.
Yeah. It was a quick read. I mean, I have to admit, I spent most of this afternoon finishing it off. I started it a week ago and got caught up in other things, and then read between last night and this afternoon. I finished it, so it was an easy read. It didn't take me long at all, but there were just things in it that didn't quite work for me.
I wonder how you felt about that, Rebecca, about in terms of police procedural, because clearly they were just completely ignoring all of that.
I knew somebody would ask me.
Was it very unrealistic?
I wish you wouldn't. There's no way he would get the DNA done at all. There's no way he'd be able to get it done. I just don't see how he'd do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's only a DS. Was he a DS? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how he did it. Yeah. Sorry, Doug. Anyway, what about the ending? Were you satisfied? Were you surprised?
I didn't see that coming with grace. Absolutely, that just got us a bolt out of blue. When with Hannah saw it at the hotel, it was like, wow, where did that come from? He was just sort of.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, it's just I didn't see it where when that came into it. I just did not see it coming when Hannah saw him saw his name at the hotel. But it was interesting, but it was totally out of the blue when he started all this, and she was out getting drunk with him and wanted a bit more, and and then he was, like someone said earlier, so he was stabbing her, and it was crazy. But hey ho, it was an interesting end to the main character, really.
Yeah, I didn't see him as the villain of the piece at all. For me, there were no. I don't like a book where you can spot what's going to happen. I don't like that, but I do like when you get to that point where it's all revealed and you think, now that makes sense. And you think back and there have been clues throughout the book, and I just didn't feel there was any of that at all. Obviously, he'd had an affair and he'd gone on and married his mistress and all that, but to me that doesn't then mean that he's going to go and sleep with his daughter's best friend, get her pregnant and kill her. that doesn't equate for me. So there was no clues at all that was the way it was going to go. Not when, well, I literally just finished the book half an hour ago, and I'm thinking back over what I've read this afternoon. I just don't think there were any clues at all to that being who was going to be the murderer.
What about everybody else? Surprised? Satisfied?
I think that he was trying to, the author was trying to show that Craig was instigating himself back in the family, meeting up with Jenny and Hannah more than he normally would have, to find out what they knew when he discovered that Hannah was trying to find out what happened to Melanie. But that was the only sort of thing you had to go on, apart from the fact every other DNA suspect had been eliminated. So no, it wasn't very convincing. It wasn't a convincing case to lead you up to realise that it had been him.
So not a satisfying ending for people.
It leaves it leaves the door open where a new case came in, and as Liam sort of wanted to take Jenny out for a coffee, and it just led into lots more potential for another book.
Yeah, there was another book released this summer. There was another book in the series. So, as Marina said, it might be that this was a setup, setting the characters up, and you might find if you went on to the next book that it's more settled in. But after this session, I'm not sure anybody's going to read the next book. Has anybody got anything else they want to say about it, or they want to discuss about this one?
I was disappointed because I'd heard about this book through other websites and chat groups, and it got so much hype. It was supposed to be so funny, so entertaining, what an interesting plot twist. And it was one of those books where the review was better than the book. I wish I could have read the book that I read the reviews of. And instead, I feel like the others, too much mishmash, too many characters. At first, I normally read paper books, but I couldn't get it on paper, so I read it on Kindle, and I thought, well, maybe this is just a Kindle problem, because it's really hard to go back on a Kindle. You can keep on going. It's not like paging back. And I also did not like it didn't bother me it was a male author. I just didn't like the portrayal of the female figures. I didn't see any of the figures as strong women, particularly the daughter, the second generation. And it sounded to me like she was so taken in with her husband. And as some of the others have commented, I thought they were going to get back together. And not only are they not getting back together, he's been cheating on his current wife, and now he's planning to kill his former wife after he's killed his current girlfriend, who just, as pointed out, happens to be, it was just too convoluted in a bizarre way. So I hope that if anybody else reads his second book, they'll tell us in the future, is it worth it giving him a second try? Maybe his second book would be better, but I'm not going to go there yet.
No, I'm not sure anybody in this group is. Go on, Margot.
I wasn't sure that the book knew what it wanted to be. Did it want to be a family focus? Did it want to be psychological? Did it want to be a mystery? Okay, let's be everything. And a book really can't do that easily. That was my feeling after I finished it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think this wins the vote this month.
But
No,
it's good to read something new and give it a go.
Absolutely.
it is.
Yeah.
It
I'd have read
is.
it. Because ultimately, I
Okay.
thought it was a good story, but it was more to do, I think, with the way that certain aspects of it were told. But you know, it was a good story without a doubt, in my view.
Okay, that's great. Next month, Margot has requested a couple of months ago that we do classics. So, as usual, if you have a suggestion you want to put forward for the vote tomorrow, email me this evening. Let me know your author or specific book, and we'll put it on the list for the vote. You've all got my email address. And the next meeting will be Monday the 2nd of November.
Could you just clarify what you mean by classics?
What do you mean by classics, Margot? Do you actually mean like Agatha Christie, that kind of age, or anything that's current that is a kind of Agatha Christie type book?
I didn't mean necessarily classic in terms of age at all. I meant traditional style.
Okay.
For example, a traditional style whodunit, which can be quite modern, like Kathy Ace's work, or it can be classic, golden age. I'm happy either way, but that was what I had in mind, a traditional style mystery.
Okay, so that's, I'm sure we'll get some interesting suggestions then.
So one where we do get a lot of clues and try to work it out for ourselves,
It's
right?
a whodunit. A whodunit, as you say.
Just watch out for those butlers.
In the library.
Okay. I look forward to getting some suggestions this evening then. So thank you everybody for joining us. And we'll see you again next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.